Welcome, Mark Oster, and I'm going to present some data that I've had nothing to do with collecting. So I will give it a really good attempt, and I will follow up with some questions at the end. This is about looking at our wetlands in Southland and how we can map them to find out exactly what sort of loss or what is happening with them over time. The people responsible for this research, Richard Ewens from Eco South, Chris Stowe, local here, also from Utica, James Deere, who is previously, yes, I think he's Bay of Plenty Regional Council now, and Southland District Council, who have put funding into this mapping project as well. Wetlands are amazing. I don't think I need to go into too much of what that is, but I must confess that if you'd asked me 20 years ago about a wetland, I wouldn't have known what it was. I would have called it by its proper name, a swamp where the Land Rover gets stuck. And one of the problems that we've had is finding out how much has decreased and what we can do about it. If I could take you back 100 years, have any of you, did you any fly in this morning? Okay, any of you never been to Invercargill? Cool, okay, well the airport you landed on wasn't here, not because it was just 100 years ago, but because it was all underwater. Southland, if you had come here 100 odd years ago, you would have found a huge wetland landscape, mainly covered in large kahikatea forests, in lots of it. The kahikatea were thought to be a real saviour for Southland for building and ship masts, but they soon found out that the timber was not that good for that, so the burgeoning dairy industry instead used the kahikatea for making butter boxes. So in early Māori used the wetland systems here a lot. We know that they held lots of flora and fauna, many of which are still endangered here. If I can go to a newspaper report from 1880, I think it will give you a sense of what Southland was facing at that time. And I quote, "The conversion of dismal swamps into smiling farms is a process not altogether unknown in this part of the colony." By 1940, a newspaper reports, "It is now recognised that the draining of so many large areas of swamp and other water holding areas was a blunder." 1940. We haven't come a long way since then, unfortunately. In New Zealand, it was estimated about 2.5 million hectares of wetlands. By 2008, estimated 90% of those were gone. Southland was one of the highest regions of loss, with just over 10% remaining. In order to find out the state of our wetlands and what loss we had, several issues came up, and one was, how do we actually measure a wetland? At what point is the wetland a wetland? In the middle, we've got some Waiarush, and then we've gone to some Manuka, and then to gorse, and then probably a drain around that. But knowing exactly where these wetlands were and how to measure them was a bit of a quandary. There's been very little data available, so the team proceeded to map using Google and various other digital photos to come up with an idea on what sort of wetland loss we had. This work is done mainly on private land. Most of the large wetlands in Southland are in dock estate, and most of those are under good care. But we didn't know what was happening on the small areas. So what the team set out to do was to by looking at old aerial photographs, begin to put polygons around anything that was over 0.5 of a hectare, which is what they decided would be how they would measure a wetland. And just as an example, he says looking for the red, yes. If we look at this one in 2007, and then over here we can see the amount of, this is the same wetland, and the amount of that was gone, has been drained or used. The problem with this is the ground truthing. Because while this can be done on a big scale to get access to a lot of these wetlands, which are all on private properties, is not necessarily a simple thing and not always available to get onto them. This map is, I think, is it a bit blurry? It's not actually a Specsavers ad. But the particular area of these wetlands that were measured and was in the lowland of sort of inside this mustardy coloured area here. That was the main area where there was expected to be large degradation of the wetlands. So to move this on a little bit, to find out a bit more about our wetlands, we embarked on starting to do some what was called high value area surveys. These are a service that we offer to private landowners to have an ecological assessment done on their properties, just from the perspective of letting them know what's there, what's special about it, and to be encouraging and promoting wetland restorations. Of the 146 wetlands that were monitored in these HVAs, which was a total of roughly 2,000 hectares, all up. 1,000 hectares, so half of that is all grazed, and much of it still is, by stock and cattle. In all the surveys of those 2,000 hectares, weeds were a problem in 100% of all cases. Only, out of those wetlands, only 400 are receiving weed control, 400 hectares, and 500 hectares receiving some kind of animal pest control. So we've still got a very long way to go to really be able to see the big changes that are happening. It's not all bad, however. During these high value area surveys that were done, there was a lot of threatened species that were found, and these were generally found either by ecologists doing the surveys on the ground or information from farmers and landowners. For example, when the ecologist is there, there may not be any kiriaria, the falcon, but the farmers are seeing kiriaria, so they were putting information into this as well. And also now, 17 of those 63 are in QE2 reserves. So there's some really good work going on in these wetlands. Oh, I think I've missed a slide. Yes. So reversing the trend, what are we doing about it? There's still a lot of work to be done, because even though there's a lot of legislation around not draining wetlands, wetlands are still being drained, some permitted and some illegally. In order to change this, we're doing a lot of work with community groups and around planting and restoration of wetlands, and with farmers, fencing, the same sort of thing about planting. We're creating our Land and Water Services team, artificial wetlands, and we're also beginning to undertake a pretty serious look at our own land that ES has, especially along our waterways, as to what we need to be doing better to retain and to stop the degradation. So our wetland loss means that we are losing lots of ecosystems, and we really need, as is around the whole country, we really need to be doing more to be seeing these areas as really essential and high value areas, and we need to get that educational message across to our stakeholders and to our farmers and private properties. Despite over 10 years of work, we've only carried out, how many was it? 10%. It's a massive job to do it, and we can only do so much at a time. Thank you very much. I've got 0 minutes, so I'm going to wind up there and go to that slide, which I think is appropriate, and ask if there is any questions, with a caveat that as I haven't done this, just put on our website yesterday is the full report behind all this. And if any of you want a link to that, come and see me, or Nick at the back over there with his hand up, and you can get more detail about it.